Shalom Aleichem, everybody. Nice to see you. Nice to hear from you. Here we are, so many days after that terrible attack in Israel. Still haven't seen things come to a head the way they should, what we were praying for. But we have to keep up the prayers and keep up the feelings. And let's dedicate our tonight's class, studying Torah, for the merit of those people that are stuck over there in the hands of those wicked people. And we can't forget about them. Every time we pray, we have to include them in our prayers. And we can't forget them or become weakened in our prayers towards them. Okay. I want to discuss tonight a very important topic in Judaism, and it's very connected to this week's portion of the Torah, Mishpatim. But the Parsha Mishpatim that will read this coming Shabbos, will be Rosh Chodesh Adar, Friday and Shabbos, the new month, Adar Rishon, the first Adar coming. 2 Adars we have this year, leap year. First Adar is coming up. Friday and Shabbos. And Shabbos will read the portion Mishpatim, which deals with many, many subjects, so many things to talk about. But one of the main things it talks about over there are the very important idea of damages, of people damaging other people, their bodies or their possessions, that they're causing a mazik, that they're doing damage to something that belongs to somebody else. Now, much time in the Talmud, the Gemara, is spent on discussing this matter very deeply, and it can be discussed for many, many days and weeks, getting all the different details involved. But I want to familiarize everybody with some of the main points of this important mitzvah. Of course, many of you probably are aware of it by now. Studied maybe younger in yeshiva, different sectors, tractates of the Gemara deal with this matter very deeply. But just to get an idea in all different areas of this important matter of damaging. I think the name of our talk tonight is Mr. What was the words? What was Rabbi Chaim, what we call tonight? If you're
not careful, you'll have to pay.
So if you're not careful, we got to pay. That's what it is. Mister, if you're not careful, you got to pay. Okay, that's what it is. So where do we find in the Torah you're not allowed to damage somebody? Of course, it's called a mitzvah sichli. It's a mitzvah that is logical, that we don't have to have a mitzvah in the Torah to tell us. It's a logical thing. Even the person we wouldn't be commanded in the mitzvah, we understand by ourselves. Even non-Jews who don't have the Torah, they logically know you can't damage people. But the Torah tells us that you're not allowed to steal. And what are we doing wrong by stealing? It's 2 things that's happening by stealing. Number 1, we're taking away something from somebody else. And number 2, we're taking it for ourselves. 2 steps. Now, the person that's been stolen from, what's he upset about? He's upset that he doesn't have his object. Whoever took it doesn't make much difference to him, because he's mainly interested to have his property in his possession. He doesn't want anybody to take it away from him. Whoever took it doesn't make no difference to him except to find him and pay back. But he doesn't get to took it. His main thing is what he's concerned about, he doesn't have it. So when it comes to damaging, that's what's being done. You're taking away his property from him, By damaging it, he doesn't have it anymore, and not the same way it was before. So it's in the same prohibition that the mitzvah Torah should not steal. Because by damaging, you're actually stealing, you're taking it away from him. The stealing itself makes no difference who's doing it. That makes no difference. The main thing is the person is losing it. So a person who had got damaged by somebody, he is, even the person who damaged didn't take it away from him. It's not he taken his possession, but the main thing, he took it away from the other person, what the other person had. So this is a reason for us to say that damaging is forbidden according to Torah law, because it's within the same Torah law of not stealing, taking something away from somebody else. Now, there's many different ways to talk about this and many different details, like I said. I want to start off with talking about Adam HaMazik, a person, man, who damages somebody else. And what type of payment does he have to have? So we say that person has to pay back if they damage somebody's body. There are 5 things that have to be considered and to be paid for. Number 1, let's say a person knocked off somebody's arm. Somebody made his arm paralyzed, can't use it anymore. So he has to pay 5 things that to be considered according to Torah law. Number 1, he has to pay for the person's own self, since he's not the same as he was before. He's not as a healthy person has a greater value than a person who's not healthy. If we look at 2 people, his value is not the same as before, and he has to pay for whatever value it was diminished because of that damage that was done to him. He has to pay for that. The person who was damaged has pain. The person has to pay for the pain that person has. Of course, I'm not going into how these things are judged. Each one in itself is judged in a certain way. How much damage a person has, how much he went down in value, how much pain, how do you pay for pain? So the word gives us a way how to pay for pain. But I'm just going into the main topic and main idea, not going into the details of how it's done. So we have number 2, pain. And we have to pay for report for doctor bills. If he has to go to the doctor, the hospital, whatever is necessary for the person to regain his health, whatever it cost the mazik, person who made the damage, we call him a mazik, and he has to pay for the doctor bills. Also, shevis it's called. We call it, we'll find nezek. Nezek means the damage. Tsar means pain. And there was a ripoy for doctor for the recovery, or the expense for the doctor bills. Sheves means the amount of time a person was taken away from his job. He can't go to he's laid up. He's losing money. And the fact he can't do his job that he's supposed to do, the person has to pay for that also. How much he is losing by the damage that he got, that he can't go back to work so fast. And that's called shevis. And boishes means the shame that a person has, in case of the shame that he was attacked in public. Somebody came and hit him publicly, and he was embarrassed by the way he was treated by somebody else. He has to pay for the boishes for the shame that he had to endure by the person hurting him that way. So it's a very expensive ordeal for a person who damages somebody else in his body. He has to make sure that if he wants to do tshuva, he wants to repent for the thing that he did, the first thing he has to do is to pay off all the bills that the Torah requires him to pay. The 5 things, repo, the tsar, repo, that's emotions, all of them have to be taken care of. It's not going to help him to ask for forgiveness if the person that is not free. Of course, he can be Muslim if he wants. He say, "Okay, don't forget about it." But he has a right to demand. You want me to forgive you, so you have to pay up all these 5 things to compensate what I'm going through, and then we'll talk about forgiveness to you. So, we say a person has to pay for damages, even if he did it by accident. Person that will damage somebody else, even though he did it by accident, he still has to pay. For instance, let's say he went and opened the door and didn't realize somebody's on the other side of the door, and he opened it too fast, and he damaged the person. He damaged he made his hand paralyzed by breaking it, or by hitting it strongly with the door he opened. The person says, "Well, what do you want for it? I didn't know you were standing there. It was an accident." Well, you should be more careful. You realize people are around. People stand. There are people sometimes on the other side of the doorway, so you have to be careful. So even though it was an accident, the person has to pay. There are some authorities that say if it's a total accident that it was impossible for him to be careful with. It was impossible for him to know. For instance, if he went to sleep and somebody put a vessel, put something, a glass or a dish by his legs, and in the middle of sleep, he moved his legs and knocked the glass on the floor, and it broke. In that case, which he had absolutely no idea, it was impossible for him not to happen. In the middle of sleep, it was put there. When he went to sleep, there was nothing there. While he was sleeping, somebody put it there, and then he got damaged. So in that case, there are some opinions that say in a case like that, he would not be obligated to pay for it. Even then, it's not so simple. We say, so you damaged it, you have to pay for it. But generally speaking, usually the person is able to be careful, more that he wasn't careful enough. So there's no excuse. The person has to make sure that he does it right, and he has to be careful and not to rely on probably or never happens, shouldn't have happened, and that type of thing. That's no excuse. The person has to always be careful not to damage somebody, even though it's not something that's usual, but you have to be ready for the unusual to make sure that you don't damage somebody. So this is a very important detail in the laws of damaging people. The 5 things, and also whether a person it's an accident or not. The Torah tells us that all different types of payments that we're discussing now, most of them are in the Torah itself, the written law, some are in the oral law. Another question involved is if a person is direct damage or indirect. Sometimes it be directly. First of all, you don't have to do it with your hand about damage. So if you take a stick and hit somebody, that's considered like you did it yourself. It's an extension of your hand, of your arm, hitting somebody. That's a direct damage that you're doing to a person. Sometimes the indirect damage would be if a person, let's say, put something in the front of the door, and a person came and opened the door and tripped on the thing. So he didn't do it with his hands. He did it indirectly, caused the person to fall. Or, of course, that's a little different that we're talking about. It was not damaged by him at all. But let's say in a car, you're driving a car and you hit somebody with the car. So is that considered that you damaged it? Well, they say it's sort of indirectly because you didn't damage the car with your hand. You stepped on the gas. and the gas went into the motor, and the motor made the wheels go around. So it's a act of damaging, but it's very indirect. The indirect is called grama or gami, and it's like Torah terms. And that's a whole question about do something indirectly, if we can cause make a person pay for an indirect damage. Sometimes the court can't make him pay, but the Shemayim, heavenly court, has complaints to the person who did it indirectly, even though the court in this world maybe can't sometimes cause a person to make a person pay. But the heavenly court says even though down there they weren't make you pay for it, but you should have been careful to, you drive a car, and even though it's indirect damage, you still have to pay for that. And it's very complicated because what's called indirect and all different ways that we could stay here all night and say different ways that are more direct and less direct, and it's something that's very discussed. If you study the Talmud, the Gemara, you'll go into very interesting different ways that this could happen. So we have called Adam HaMazik, person who himself is mazik, and he has to pay in these 5 ways that we said. Then we have, besides that, you have that the person owns an animal, and he has to watch that the animal shouldn't damage. Person owns a dog, and the dog goes and damages. He has a pit bull, whatever it is, and they go and damages somebody or something. The owner is liable and has to pay for the damage, unless he chained the dog good enough that under normal circumstances nothing should have happened, but somehow the animal got away, and in the unusual way and manner that usually doesn't happen. But otherwise, he is liable to pay for the damage that his animal did. But it's a dog or a cat or whatever it might be. At times, the Torah talks about an ox or doing damage. But really, let's make this what type of animal it is. It can be a bird too. If you have a bird that goes out and it damages whatever it might be. So there's different ways of damaging. One way is by, I mentioned that you can do damage with his paws or with his mouth to damage somebody or something. Or it could do what's called nezek, and through negicha, we're saying, through direct damaging, where the animal didn't get any physical benefit. But let's say the animal goes and eats something, somebody else's food. He goes, the person puts out something. Let's say they made a roast and wanted to put outside to air out, and the animal came and ate it up. So the owner of the dog or cat, whoever ate it up, has to pay for it, because you have to watch your animal from making any type of damage. And let's say the animal that's called shame, a tooth. Tooth means eating. Whether the animal did it without deriving any benefit, it just went ahead and damaged with its power, with its weight, or if it ate the thing that was belonged to somebody else, the owner of the animal has to pay for it. Or if the animal is just walking, and while it's walking, it steps on something and breaks it, it's called regel. He has to pay for that too. The regel. So his animal's walking, somebody going into, let's say, a lot of times people have stores and they put their wares outside for people to see. We see that a lot of that around, and he has an animal going with him. Whether it was running, the dog was running, and stepped on and knocked over somebody's in the showcase or something. We had selling it to people and put it outside for people to see. And the animal went, and while it was walking and running, it knocked it over and broke it. The owner is liable, has to pay for that. That's another way of an animal doing that's called regel. So you have different ways, types of damages that person we have to worry about. And if the animal was, like I said before, the same way in every other way it's damages, if the owner tied up the animal or fenced it in or brought it into the house and he watched it, but the animal got out in an unusual manner, so then the owner would not be liable to pay because he watched the animal like he should. But otherwise, if he was negligent about it, then he has to pay for whatever damage that his animal might have done. So this is also what the Torah is talking about in this case that we're discussing, the damages. And we will have to take it seriously. People sometimes think, it's not so bad. I mentioned sometimes with your car, you damage somebody else's car by scratching it or backing up or trying to get through a very narrow way and damage the person's property by that. So that's something we have to pay for. It's very possible that you don't know who the person is. So you go and scratch a person's car, damage his car, and whose car is it? You have in a parking lot someplace in Manhattan, wherever it might be. You have hundreds of cars there, and how are you supposed to know whose car it is? So you may say, wait for the person to come. Maybe he'll live for more than 24 hours. You never know how long the person's going to be there. So you have to take his license plate, or you have to leave a note to the person that, I'm sorry, I damaged your car. Here's my phone number. Call me up, and I'll compensate for whatever it costs you. So that's the real thing of what a person should do. If you damage somebody without knowing who you damaged, if he comes back and finds it there, it's going to be very upsetting to him naturally, and it's only right for the person who's doing it to make sure that he's going to take care of it. I think we mentioned in the past, we can't do tshuva. Can't do tshuva on the thing that if you don't pay back the person. We mentioned a little bit before this, even tonight, but if you damage the person's car and you don't know who it is, the person comes and he's very upset about it, you can't do tshuva for it. You have to ask Hashem to forgive you for damaging. You're not allowed to damage, but if you don't pay back, you can't do a real tshuva. So that's why we're saying that you have to make sure that the person that it was done to should know who to call and be able to do tshuva by paying him back, and then be able to say, Hashem, I'm sorry for what I did. I should have been more careful. You have to ask him. You have two things. You have to ask him forgiveness for doing it, and you have to pay him for it also. Both things you have to. There's the 3 steps. Damaging 3 steps. You have to, the person that you damaged, you have to pay him back. Number 2, you have to ask him forgiveness for doing it. And then you have to ask Hashem forgiveness for doing for doing the sin of damaging somebody else. It's a 3-way tshuva a person has to do. You just walk away and say, well, he won't catch me anyway. I'll get away with it. He might get away with him, but not the Shemayim in heaven. And even it brought down in the holy books that sometimes people have to come back to this world again in the Gilgal, reincarnation, for a person to go back to pay back something that they took from somebody else and never paid back. Because until they pay back that person or his relatives that took over from him, maybe he died already. Maybe we have paid back to his relatives, that his offspring, but it's not a simple thing to take somebody else's property or damage it and not pay it back. It's a very, very tricky way for a person to do tshuva afterwards. Just like we mentioned, sometimes a person who's not honest in his weights and he's selling things and he's not honest about the things that he's selling, either we have false weights or false advertisement that people are paying more than they should and they're not getting what they're paying for. That's a way, how can he do tshuva for that? People come to a store, it's open for the last 50 years, and how many people cheated? Hundreds, thousands of people. How are they supposed to pay back to them? That's a very scary type of thing. So something that we have to keep in mind very strongly, that make sure that we don't do things that we cannot do tshuva for, chas v'sholom. And that when getting into monetary matters, we're getting into that situation of making sure we're able to pay back the damage that we did. So, and these are some of the examples that we're talking about that are involved. So we just touched upon some of the things that this parsha is talking about, and what we have to take seriously to learn. And even though this is like a mitzvah which is logical, and even non-Jews have the mitzvah of not stealing or not damaging, but we do it for a mitzvah, not because only it's logical. We do it because that's Hashem's will. That's the difference when a non-Jew does a mitzvah of the 7 Noahide laws, and a Jew does a mitzvah. They're doing it maybe because they feel that's the right thing to do. But really, we're supposed to think it's the right thing to do because this is what Hashem wants. That's what we're supposed to do because it's Hashem's will to do so. So we touched a little bit upon it tonight about this. I want to maybe explain it next time. We'll learn to get together next week. There are more and more ideas about damaging that I think you'll be surprised to know some more details about it. But this is something to put in our pockets now to take them with us. And we said, he did say if you had to make sure that you compensate for any damages that we caused to other people.